What would you do if an HOA stormed onto your dock at sunrise and told you the lake was no longer yours? I'd lived in my Lakeside lodge for less than a week when the HOA showed up at 7 a.m., standing on my dock and declaring it community property. No warning, no meeting, just paperwork, cameras, and the kind of confidence that assumes you'll back down. What they didn't know was that they'd picked the wrong landowner. At 7:02 a.m., the lake looked like a sheet of polished glass. Autumn fog hovered low over turquoise water, drifting between pine trunks like slow breath. Across the cove, maples burned red and gold, their reflections trembling with every faint ripple. My lodge, stone, timber, and tall windows, sat behind me like a quiet witness. A light wind carried the bite of wet leaves and the soft creak of dock ropes. I'd moved in less than a week ago. I'd come for silence. After years in water infrastructure work, dams, spillways, pump stations, the only thing I wanted from water now was peace. Clearwater Ridge had promised it. Private shoreline, a small dock, and easy access to the marina without the chaos of city life. I stood on the deck with coffee warming my hands, watching my motorboat tug gently at its line. Out past it, the community marina was still asleep. Masts, hulls, and a couple of white yachts sitting quiet in their slips. Then gravel crunched close, sharp and deliberate. A white SUV rolled into my circular drive. The door opened, and a flash of bright pink stepped out, so loud against the brown and gold woods it didn't look real. A woman in a perfectly tailored suit started down toward the water like she owned the ground. Two men followed her. One carried a tablet and clipboard. The other held a thick legal folder, the kind that usually comes with threats. I set my mug on the railing and walked down to the dock. The boards were damp and cool under my boots, groaning softly with each step. The water lapped at the pilings. My boat line creaked once like a warning. The woman reached the dock and didn't pause at the edge. She stepped onto my boards without asking, heels clicking with the confidence of someone used to crossing lines. "Mr. Cole?" she called, already raising her voice like she wanted neighbors to hear. "I'm right here," I said, keeping my tone even. She stopped 3 feet away, platinum blonde hair, flawless makeup, and that bright pink suit. Sharp shoulders, crisp seams, no speck of dust. In one hand, she held a stack of papers like a weapon. "Bethany Reed," she said, president of the Clearwater Ridge Homeowners Association. The men stayed behind her shoulders, positioned like assistants and witnesses. Bethany gave me a smile that looked friendly until you noticed her eyes. They didn't settle on my face. They scanned past me, toward the lodge windows, the boat lift, the security lights, the shoreline. "We're here about a compliance matter," she said. "Is my mailbox the wrong shade of green?" I asked. No one laughed. Bethany's smile tightened. "This is more serious," she replied, and lifted the top sheet so I could set to the bold title. Notice of Seizure and Emergency. Access Authorization. For a second, my brain tried to correct the words into something normal. Notice of violation. Notice of hearing. Anything but what it said. I looked back at her. "Seizure?" Bethany leaned forward slightly, heels clicking again. "This property has been identified as a strategic community asset," she said, as if she were reading a weather report. "A strategic," I repeated, not sure whether to laugh or swear. "The dock and marina access are now under HOA emergency control for community use," she said, louder now, as if volume could turn nonsense into law. "Effective immediately." Behind her, the man with the tablet began taking photos. My boat, the dock posts, the lodge behind me. Little flashes snapped across the water like shards of light. "Stop photographing my property," I said. He didn't stop. Bethany didn't even look back. She didn't have to. "You'll remove any private signage," Bethany continued, flipping a page. And you'll provide keys or access codes to any dock gate or security controls. Our committee will be conducting inspections. I felt heat rise under my collar. Not panic, outrage, but I kept my voice level. You can't be serious. Bethany's polite mask slipped. Underneath was certainty, the kind you only see in people who've bullied others into folding for years. Oh, I'm serious, she said. If you refuse, the fines begin today, $500 a day, then legal action, then forced compliance. The man with the folder finally spoke. Mr. Cole, cooperation would be in your best interest. I glanced past them. 2 more vehicles sat up near my drive, like they'd brought backup for a show. Bethany lifted her chin and said the line she'd come here to plant in the world. This dock belongs to the community now, whether you like it or not. The fog seemed colder. The birds went quiet. Even the soft lake sounds felt too loud. I stared at the water for a beat, letting it calm me the way reservoirs used to on early inspection mornings. Beautiful, silent, powerful. Then I looked back at Bethany Reed. You're moving fast, I said softly. She blinked. Excuse me? You didn't knock. You didn't introduce yourself. You came with cameras and lawyers and a seizure notice, I said. That tells me this was planned. Bethany's smile twitched, then returned, thinner now. 48 hours, she said. If you don't comply, we escalate. I slid my hand into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Not dramatic, not shaking, just calm. Bethany's eyes tracked it. Calling your attorney? She asked, almost amused. I placed the call and kept my gaze on her face while it rang. Sarah, I said when the line picked up. They're on my dock, right now. Bethany's expression cracked. Just a hairline fracture. I listened for a beat, then added, clearly so everyone could hear, Bethany Reed is telling me my marina access belongs to the community. The tablet man lowered his device an inch, like he'd suddenly remembered what trespassing was. Bethany stepped forward, voice sharper. Who are you calling? Didn't answer her. I ended the call and slid the phone back into my pocket. Okay, I said. Her brows pulled together. Okay? Okay, I repeated, calm enough to irritate her. You can bring your papers. You can bring your cameras. But you don't get to rewrite property lines because you like the view. For the first time, Bethany looked uncertain, like she'd expected fear and found a wall. She straightened, recovered her posture, and turned as if to leave, calling over her shoulder so the lake could hear her. This is HOA property now. I watched her walk back up the dock, bright pink against the autumn woods, and one question kept pounding in my head. Why would an HOA move this aggressively, this fast? The answer didn't come from her. It came from the way she moved, like someone following a schedule, not an impulse. From the way her compliance committee took pictures before they'd even finished speaking. From the way she said seizure, as if the word had already been tested somewhere else and had worked. I stood there after they left, the dock boards cooling under my boots, my coffee forgotten on the rail. Wind chased dry leaves across the water. Somewhere across the cove, a screen door shut. A dog barked once, then stopped, like the neighborhood had decided to pretend it hadn't just witnessed a land grab at sunrise. Inside the lodge, the air still smelled faintly of new paint and old timber. When I'd bought the place, the realtor had called it understated luxury. That meant thick beams and stone fireplaces, a kitchen built for someone who hosted holidays, and windows that framed the lake like it was a private painting. I'd chosen it because it felt solid, unbothered, like it had survived storms before. But now, standing in my great room with Bethany's words still hanging in the air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, an itch between my shoulder blades, the kind that comes when you realize you're being watched. My phone buzzed. Sarah Mitchell's name filled the screen. "Tell me exactly what she said," Sarah demanded the second I answered. No greeting, no small talk. That's why I trusted her. HOA President, Bethany Reed. She walked onto my dock at 7:02 and handed me a Notice of Seizure and Emergency Access Authorization. Said my dock and marina access are now under HOA emergency control, I said, repeating it slowly because it still sounded ridiculous. Fines, inspections, keys, cameras, the whole thing. There was a pause, and I could hear paper moving on her end, like she was already opening a file. "Did she give you anything else?" Sarah asked. "No, just threats." "Okay," Sarah said. "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything verbally. And whatever you do, don't let them into your house." "They were already inside my living room," I said. For about 10 seconds. I stepped outside with them. Sarah exhaled hard. "Bethany Reed doesn't do random. If she's coming at you like this, she thinks she's holding a lever." "A lever on what?" I asked. "My dock?" Sarah's voice lowered. "Your lodge." That word, lodge, felt heavier than dock. The dock was boards and rope. The lodge was my address, my name on a closing statement, my plan for the rest of my life. "How does an HOA seize a house?" I asked. "Usually they can't," Sarah said, "but they can harass, fine, lean, and pressure until people fold. The question is why they want yours badly enough to risk leaving fingerprints." I walked to the window facing the lake. The water was so clear you could see pale stones on the bottom near shore. My motorboat rocked gently, a quiet little thing, with a clean hull and a covered console. Nothing flashy. And yet Bethany had shown up like she was taking possession of a trophy. "It's been less than a week," I said quietly. "How did I end up on her radar this fast?" Sarah didn't answer right away. "Remy, tell me something. What do you know about Clearwater Ridge?" I laughed without humor. "That it has a gate, expensive landscaping, and a homeowners association with too much free time." "Before that," Sarah pressed. "Before the gate. Before the HOA. The land." I stared at the shoreline. The way it curved in a clean arc around the water. The way the dock sat where the old stone steps met the lake. I'd asked those questions when I bought the place. Maybe not with suspicion, but with the careful habits of an engineer who'd spent his life learning that what you don't measure is what collapses later. "The lodge sits on 40 acres, I said. "Private shoreline. The title shows the boundary goes down to the ordinary high water mark. There's an easement for marina access on the north road. And, Sarah prompted. "And the dock is older," I admitted. "The permits date back to the previous owner, a tech guy. He reinforced pilings, added a boat lift, upgraded electrical. He did it right." Sarah went quiet again, then asked, "Do you know why a tech guy built a lodge like a fortress?" I frowned. I thought he was just paranoid. "Or he knew what he had," Sarah said. "Remy, lakefront property with private dock and marina access is like gold. It's not just water, it's control." Control. That word hit me harder than it should have, because it took me back to my old work, standing at the top of a spillway, looking down at gates that could raise or lower a town's water level with one turn. When you control water, you control a lot more than water. I moved to the kitchen island and opened the folder the closing attorney had sent me, copies of the deed, survey map, and the neat stack of documents that prove you have a right to stand somewhere and say, "Mine." Sarah's tone sharpened. "I want you to think about something. Why would an HOA want your lodge specifically?" "Because it was pretty. Because it sat right on the lake. Because it had the best view, or because it had the best access." My mind flashed to the community marina. Those yachts, the slips, the little gatehouse that monitored who came and went. If someone wanted to host something private, something expensive, something that required discretion, my lodge was the only place that sat far enough from the marina to feel isolated, but close enough to use it. I pictured Bethany Reed's eyes scanning my windows as she stood in my living room, not admiring, calculating. I didn't just buy a house, I said slowly. I bought a location. Sarah's voice softened by an inch. Exactly. A memory surfaced, 3 days earlier when I first arrived. The moving truck had rolled in late afternoon, sunlight slanting through the pines. My pickup followed behind, tires whispering on gravel. I'd stood in the driveway and listened to the lake for the first time. No traffic, no sirens, just water and wind. Then I'd noticed a pair of people walking along the distant shoreline, far beyond my property line, moving like they weren't out for a stroll. One of them had pointed toward my dock. At the time, I'd dismissed it as neighbors being curious. Now, it felt like recon. That first night, I'd driven into town for groceries, stopping at a small marina supply store to buy rope and a new life vest. The clerk, a man in his 60s with a cap that read Lake Patrol, had chatted while ringing me up. "Lodge finally sold, huh?" he'd said. "Just closed," I'd replied. He'd nodded, eyes narrowing with the kind of interest that isn't friendly. "You're gonna meet Bethany." "Who's Bethany?" He'd laughed once. "The HOA. She don't like surprises." I'd smiled then, thinking it was harmless local gossip. I wasn't smiling now. "What do you want me to do today?" I asked Sarah, bringing myself back to the present. "Do not react emotionally," Sarah said. "That's what people like Bethany feed on. Instead, I want you to send me pictures of every document she gave you, front and back. And I want you to walk your property line, quietly. Take photos of markers, any new stakes, any flagging tape, anything out of place." I looked out the window again. Leaves swirled across the dock like little sparks. The air smelled like lake water and distant chimney smoke. "Walk my property line," I repeated. "Yes," Sarah said, "because if she's moving this fast, she's either bluffing or she thinks the paperwork is already in her favor." "And if it is?" Sarah's voice turned calm in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Then we figure out what she's actually trying to take. And why." I ended the call and grabbed my jacket. Outside, the gravel felt crunchy under my boots. The woods on my right stood dense and dark, the kind of forest that swallowed sound. The lake on my left stayed bright and clear, like it wanted to look innocent. I followed the edge where grass turned to pine needles, then to scattered stones near the water. My breath came out white. At first, everything looked normal. Then I saw it. A thin orange ribbon tied to a sapling at knee height, fluttering in the breeze. Not a natural thing. Not something that belonged. 10 feet farther, another ribbon. And another. A line. A new line. I crouched, fingers brushing the ribbon. It was fresh, bright, clean, still stiff from the roll. Someone had come on my land in the last 48 hours and marked something. My heart didn't race. It sank. I stood and looked up through the trees. From this angle, you could see the curve of my driveway and the roofline of the lodge, stone and timber against gold leaves. If someone was marking my land, they weren't preparing to find me. They were preparing to claim me. And that brought me back to Bethany Reed's voice, echoing over the water like she'd rehearsed it. "This is HOA property now." The question wasn't whether she was bluffing. The question was what she knew that I didn't. By late morning, the lake had burned off its fog. Sunlight cut through the trees in sharp bands, lighting up the dock like a stage. I'd just finished photographing the orange ribbons when I heard engines again, More than one this time. 2 pickup trucks rolled down my drive, followed by a dark sedan. They parked with deliberate spacing, blocking nothing but making a statement. Doors opened. Boots hit gravel. Bethany Reed stepped out first. Same bright pink suit. Same polished confidence. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her came a man in a charcoal jacket with a clipboard and a laser measure clipped to his belt. Another carried a camera rig instead of a phone. Professional, heavy. The third was older, silver-haired, wearing loafers that had never touched mud. He held a slim briefcase and looked around like he was already bored. Bethany smiled when she saw me, the way people do when they think the second meeting will end differently than the first. "Good," she said. "You're here." "I live here," I replied. She ignored that. "This will go faster if you cooperate." "With what?" I asked. She turned to the man with the briefcase. "Please." He stepped forward and opened it, pulling out a neatly bound packet. Blue cover, gold seal, tabs sticking out like bookmarks in a textbook. "Mr. Cole," he said, voice smooth and practiced. "I'm here representing the Clearwater Ridge Homeowners Association. This document outlines an emergency shoreline ordinance passed by the board late last night." "Late last night," I repeated. Bethany folded her arms. "Emergency vote. Without notifying homeowners?" I asked. She didn't flinch. "The bylaws allow it when community assets are at risk." The man handed me the packet. The paper felt heavier than it should have. I flipped it open. Emergency Shoreline Access and Community Use Ordinance. The words jumped off the page. I scanned quickly. Years of reviewing contracts had trained my eyes to catch certain phrases. Strategic shoreline properties. Temporary community control. Mandatory access for inspection and event readiness. I looked up. Event readiness? Bethany stepped closer, heels sinking slightly into the damp ground near the dock. "Clearwater Ridge hosts high-value gatherings," she said. "Charity functions, donor receptions, cultural events, the kind that enhance property values." "On my dock," I said. "For the community," she corrected. "Your property is uniquely suited." The man with the camera had already moved past us, filming the dock, the boat lift, the electrical box. The surveyor crouched near one of the pilings, laser flashing briefly against the wood. "Stop," I said. No one stopped. "Under this ordinance, the lawyer continued calmly, you're required to provide access within 48 hours. Failure to comply results in escalating fines starting at $500 per day." Bethany tilted her head. "We don't want to be unpleasant, Remy." I laughed once, sharp and short. "You started unpleasant at 7:02 this morning." Her smile thinned. "We started necessary." I turned a page and froze. The ordinance listed affected properties. Not a general area, not a range. My parcel number, my dock length, my shoreline curve described in language that matched my deed almost word for word. "You didn't write this overnight," I said quietly. Bethany's eyes flickered. Just once. "This was prepared by legal counsel," she replied, "and approved unanimously." "Approved by who?" I asked. "The same board that didn't tell residents?" She gestured vaguely. "Procedural details." I felt heat building, but I kept my voice level. "You're claiming emergency powers over my land without proof of emergency." Bethany's tone cooled. "The emergency is that this property is underutilized and improperly managed. Because I've lived here less than a week? Because the previous owner failed to integrate the property into community operations," she shot back. There it was. Not safety. Not compliance. Operations. I looked past her, toward the marina. Sunlight flashed off a white yacht idling near the slips, crew moving quietly on deck. It wasn't docked. It was waiting, How many events are scheduled? I asked. Bethany didn't answer. She nodded to the surveyor instead. He stood and pointed toward the orange ribbons I'd found earlier. We'll need to confirm these boundary adjustments, he said, as if it were already agreed. Adjustments? I said. Temporary, Bethany added quickly. For logistics. I closed the packet and handed it back to the lawyer. You're not stepping another foot onto my land. The man raised an eyebrow. Mr. Cole, refusing a lawful inspection could have serious consequences. I took a breath and let it out slowly, the way I used to before opening a spillway gate that controlled thousands of acre-feet of water. You keep using the word lawful, I said. That doesn't make it true. Bethany's patience cracked. Do you have any idea how this looks? She snapped. A private owner blocking community access? You'll make enemies. I didn't start this, I said. You're ending it badly, she replied. She signaled to the man with the camera. He zoomed in on my face, lens whirring softly. Document refusal, Bethany said, and note non-compliance. I pulled my phone out and raised it. I'm documenting too. For a moment, no one spoke. Wind rustled the leaves. Water slapped softly against the dock posts. Bethany recovered first. She smoothed her jacket, stepped back, and smiled again, this time without warmth. You have 48 hours, she said. After that, we proceed without you. She turned and walked back toward the trucks. The others followed, efficient and silent, like a crew, packing up after rehearsal. As they drove away, dust rose in the sunlight and hung there, slow and deliberate. I stood alone by the water, ordnance echoing in my head. This wasn't enforcement. This was acquisition. And whatever Bethany Reed thought she knew about my land, she was confident enough to bet her position on it. That meant one thing. Someone else had already folded. I went inside and shut the door, not because I was afraid, but because the house suddenly felt like a control room. The kind you close up before you start reading gauges. The lodge creaked as it settled, timber warming in the sun, stone holding the night's cold. I spread the HOA packet on the kitchen island and laid my own documents beside it. Deed, survey, closing statement, permits for the dock and lift. Two versions of reality, face to face. I called Sarah. Send me scans of everything, she said. Every page. I want the metadata. While the scanner hummed, I read. Slowly this time. The HOA ordinance wasn't sloppy, it was precise. Too precise. It referenced shoreline curves, dock setbacks, and access corridors with language that mirrored my survey, down to the angle where the shoreline bent near the old stone steps. I felt the first real chill of the day. My deed described my boundary to the ordinary high water mark, with riparian rights extending outward, standard for lakefront property here. The HOA document described a community shoreline management zone that overlapped my dock by 12 feet and my lift by 6. It did so by citing a corrected survey I'd never seen. I flipped to the back. There it was, an exhibit labeled Survey Revision, Proposed. Proposed by whom? Sarah called back as if she'd felt the question. Remy, she said. I'm looking at your scans. That exhibit isn't recorded. What does that mean? I asked. It means it doesn't exist, she said. Not legally. A survey revision like that has to be filed with the county. It has to be stamped, dated, signed. This one's aspirational. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. So they're bluffing. Not exactly, Sarah replied. They're attempting to create a paper trail in real time. They're acting as if it's already true, so you'll treat it like it is. I looked back at the orange ribbons I could see through the window. They marked my land. Which is why I want you to keep photographing everything, Sarah said. But there's more. I waited. The ordinance language about event readiness and strategic shoreline, that's not HOA boilerplate, she continued. That's commercial use language. Someone drafted this with a purpose. A knock came at the door, sharp and tentative. I opened it to find a man in his late 60s standing on the porch, ball cap in his hands. Weathered face, kind eyes. He glanced past me toward the lake like he was checking to make sure it was still there. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "Name's Marcus Hale. I live up the road." I recognized him. He'd waved when I first drove in. "I saw Bethany here this morning," Marcus continued. "Figured you might need to hear something before she comes back." I stepped aside. "Come in." We sat at the kitchen table. The ordinance still spread between us like an accusation. Marcus didn't touch it. "She did this to the Parkers first," he said quietly. "Then the Collins place. Both lakefront. Both had docks." "What happened?" I asked. "Fines, inspections, emergency votes. Same words you're hearing," Marcus said. "They fought for a while. Then the liens came. They sold." "To who?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "Shell companies, different names, same lawyers." My jaw tightened. "And the properties?" "Used on weekends," he said. "Lights on late, cars with out-of-state plates, boats coming and going." I glanced toward the marina again. The yacht was gone now, leaving a pale wake that faded quickly. Sarah spoke through my phone, still on speaker. "Marcus, did the HOA ever explain why those properties were targeted?" Marcus snorted. "They said community enhancement." Sarah didn't laugh. "That's what I thought." When Marcus left, the sun was lower, shadows stretching across the dock. I walked the shoreline again, slower this time, reading the land the way I used to read spillways, looking for what someone else had tried to change. That's when I saw it. A small metal tag nailed to a piling beneath the dock, half hidden by shadow. New, shiny, stamped with a number. I crouched, wiped it clean, and took a photo. "Sarah," I said, heart steady now, mind sharp. "They didn't just rewrite my boundary." "What did they do?" she asked. "They started tagging it." There was a pause on the line. Then, "Okay, that means they think they have authority." "Do they?" I asked. Sarah's voice hardened, the way it did when a case stopped being theoretical. "Not yet, but they're close enough to scare people." I stood and looked out at the lake, autumn light breaking apart on the water. The lodge felt smaller than it had that morning, but not weaker, just clearer. Bethany Reed hadn't come to find me. She'd come to test whether I knew what I owned. And now that I did, there was no going back. The next 2 days passed in a strange, deliberate quiet. Not peace. Quiet like the air before a pressure system breaks. The lake stayed calm, glassy in the mornings, restless by afternoon as wind funneled down the valley. Leaves skittered across the dock in little bursts. The ropes on my boat creaked at night like they were talking to each other. Bethany didn't come back right away. Instead, her presence showed up in smaller ways. A white pickup idled on the road beyond my gate one morning, engine running, driver pretending to check his phone. When I stepped onto the porch, it rolled forward and disappeared. That afternoon, a temporary sign appeared near the marina entrance. Neighborhood event schedule pending, mounted crookedly, as if someone had rushed it. I didn't touch it. I listened. I took photos of everything. Time-stamped. Wide shots, then close-ups. The orange ribbons. The metal tag on the piling. Tire tracks where trucks had turned around too close to my fence. Each click of the camera steadied me, the way documenting field conditions used to when a structure was under stress. You don't argue with water. You measure it. Sarah came by on the third morning, her SUV crunching up the drive just after sunrise. She stepped out in boots and a jacket that had seen more courtrooms than campfires, carrying a canvas bag heavy with paper. "You've got the right instinct," she said, as we walked the shoreline together. "You didn't confront. You observed." "I'm not hiding," I said. She nodded. "No, you're letting them reveal themselves." We stopped at the dock. Sarah crouched, ran her hand along the piling where the metal tag had been nailed, and took a photo. "This is sloppy," she said. "They're assuming you won't know what you're looking at." "What are they assuming I'll do?" I asked. She stood and brushed her hands on her jeans. "Get angry, miss a deadline, sign something under pressure. And if I don't? Then they escalate." That word lingered. We went inside and spread documents across the table again, this time adding county plats and historical shoreline maps Sarah had pulled that morning. Lines overlapped, dates conflicted. And right there, like a hairline crack in concrete, was the HOA's mistake. "They're relying on a community access easement that never extended past the old boathouse," Sarah said, tapping the map. "Your dock was built later, under a different permit. They know that." "Then why try?" I asked. Sarah looked at me carefully. "Because if they create enough confusion, someone like you might decide it's cheaper to settle than fight." I thought of the Parkers, the Collins place, Marcus's voice low and resigned. That afternoon, Marcus came by again. This time he didn't bring words. He brought coffee and a folded piece of paper. "I shouldn't have this," he said, setting it on the counter. "But I do." It was a marina schedule, handwritten notes in the margins, dates circled, names I didn't recognize. "What is this?" I asked. "Events," Marcus said. "Private ones. They've been planning them for months." I scanned the page. One date stood out. Tomorrow morning, at my dock. "They didn't just assume you'd fold," Marcus said quietly. "They scheduled you." That night, the lake felt different, darker. Wind pushed small waves against the pilings, steady and insistent. I stood on the dock long after sunset, jacket pulled tight, listening to the water strike wood again and again. At 10:47 p.m., headlights flared across the trees on the far side of the cove. A boat engine idled low, not quite approaching, not quite leaving. I raised my phone and recorded until the lights cut out. I slept lightly. Just before dawn, the sound of engines woke me. Diesel, close. I looked out the bedroom window and saw them, trucks lining the road near my gate, silhouettes moving with purpose. Survey gear, toolboxes, a flatbed with lumber stacked neat and ready. Bethany Reed stepped out last, pink suit replaced with a darker shade, more serious. She stood there for a moment, surveying the dock like a general reviewing a battlefield. This wasn't an inspection. This was a takeover. I pulled on my boots, slipped my phone into my pocket, and walked downstairs. The lodge was quiet, solid, every beam exactly where it belonged. When I stepped outside, Bethany turned and smiled like she'd been waiting all night. "Good morning," she called. "We're ready to proceed." Behind her, a yacht's engine echoed faintly from the marina, timed too perfectly to be coincidence. I didn't answer. I just walked down to the dock and waited. The air was sharp with cold, the kind that wakes you up faster than coffee. Dew slicked the boards, making them shine under the pale morning light. Across the cove, the marina was suddenly alive, crew moving on deck, a second boat idling in place, radios crackling softly. It felt like a stage set before the curtain rose. Bethany approached with purpose, heels steady on wood this time, as if she'd practiced. Around her, people fanned out. 2 contractors carrying tool bags, the surveyor with his laser, the man with the camera rig already filming. Another man followed, younger, clean-cut, wearing a jacket with a logo stitched neatly on the chest. Clearwater Ridge Compliance. Bethany stopped a few feet from me and held up a new packet of papers, thicker than before. "This is your final notice," she said. "Under the emergency ordinance, we're authorized to secure the dock and adjacent structures for inspection and preparation." "Preparation for what?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "For scheduled community use." The camera lens tilted toward my face, close enough that I could hear it adjust focus. "I'm not giving you access," I said. Bethany sighed, theatrical. "Then we'll proceed without your cooperation." She nodded once. The contractor named Jake, broad shoulders, work gloves already on, stepped forward and reached for the lock on the storage box near the dock steps. My storage box. The one that held life vests and tools. "Don't," I said. He paused, looked at Bethany. "Proceed," she said. Jake bent and pulled out a bolt cutter. The sound of metal snapping echoed across the water, loud and final. A gull lifted off from the shoreline, startled. "That's trespassing," I said calmly. Bethany smiled. "This is community property now." The words hit harder this time, backed by action. The surveyor started measuring distances, calling numbers to the man with the clipboard. The camera operator circled, capturing every angle like this was content, not coercion. A small crowd had gathered near the marina fence, neighbors drawn by the noise, by the spectacle. I spotted Marcus among them, arms crossed, jaw tight. Bethany raised her voice so everyone could hear. "Mr. Cole has refused lawful access under a duly passed emergency ordinance. This refusal will be noted." She turned to me. "You're doing this to yourself." I felt the old instinct to argue, to list facts, to stop the madness with reason. Instead, I stayed where I was and let them keep moving, because every step they took was another line they crossed. Jake and another contractor began setting new hardware on the dock. Temporary, they'd call it. Clamps, brackets. A portable gate leaned against the flatbed, ready to be installed. "You're changing my dock," I said. "Securing it," Bethany corrected. The yacht near the marina eased closer, stopping just short of my shoreline. Crew watched from the rail, pretending not to watch, pretending this was normal. I pulled my phone out and started recording openly. Bethany noticed and laughed. "By all means, transparency is important." Jake straightened and wiped his hands. "Where do you want the gate, Bethany?" She pointed. "There, across the entry." Across my entry, blocking my access to the water. "Do it," she said. The gate scraped against the boards as they dragged it into place. Metal rang against wood. Each sound felt deliberate, like a hammer striking a claim. I took a step forward. "You're making a mistake." Bethany's smile vanished. "No," she snapped. "You are." She turned to the man in the compliance jacket. "Read it." He cleared his throat and began reciting from a printed page, voice flat and official. "Pursuant to Clearwater Ridge Emergency Shoreline Ordinance Section 4. "That's enough," a new voice said. Heads turned. Sarah Mitchell stood at the top of the dock steps, coat open, phone in hand, eyes sharp. She hadn't parked near the crowd. She'd walked in quietly, the way she always did when she wanted to see the whole picture before stepping into it. Bethany's expression flickered. "Who are you?" "Counsel," Sarah replied. "For the property owner you're currently trespassing against." She walked down the dock, heels firm, gaze never leaving Bethany. "I advised my client to let you proceed. I needed to see how far you'd go." Bethany scoffed. "You're too late." No, Sarah said. You're early. She turned to me briefly, a look passing between us. Confirmation. Then she faced Bethany again. Every action your contractors have taken since you arrived this morning violates the limits of your own ordinance, Sarah said evenly. And that's before we discuss riparian rights. Bethany stiffened. We're well within the fantasy you've created, Sarah cut in. Not the law. The surveyor hesitated, laser lowering slightly. The camera operator paused, uncertain. Bethany raised her chin. Finish the work, she ordered. Jake hesitated this time. He looked at Sarah, looked at me, then back at Bethany. I said nothing. The lake lapped against the dock, steady and patient. Bethany's eyes burned. Do it. Jake set his jaw and reached for the gate again. And that was when I knew she was going to push until someone stopped her. The question was who? Sarah stepped forward before Jake could touch the metal. Before you do that, she said, calm but loud enough for everyone to hear, you should understand exactly what you're standing on. Bethany laughed, sharp and dismissive. I understand perfectly. No, Sarah replied. You don't. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded set of documents, thicker than anything Bethany had brought. The paper edges were worn, not fresh, handled, referenced, real. Sarah didn't hand them over. She held them where everyone could see. This dock, Sarah continued, is not governed by your community access fantasy. It's governed by riparian rights recorded with the county decades before Clearwater Ridge ever installed its first decorative fence. The surveyor froze. His laser hung idle in his hand. Bethany scoffed. Riparian rights don't override HOA authority. They do when the HOA never had authority to begin with, Sarah said. She unfolded the first page and held it up. A stamped county seal caught the light. Mr. Cole's deed grants exclusive riparian rights to the ordinary high water mark and the submerged land directly adjacent to this dock. That includes control of access, use, and improvement. Bethany's smile twitched. That's not what our council told you because your council didn't look hard enough, Sarah interrupted. Or because they hoped you wouldn't. The crowd near the marina fence leaned closer. Phones came out. Someone whispered my name. Sarah turned slightly, indicating the dock hardware. Every clamp you've installed, every lock you've cut, every measurement you've taken this morning has been on privately controlled riparian land. Jake swallowed. That makes it trespass, Sarah said evenly, and interference with a property interest. Bethany's voice sharpened. You're bluffing. Sarah didn't raise her voice. She changed documents. And that, she said, tapping the next page, is just the beginning. She unfolded a second sheet, an easement agreement, older, heavier, with multiple signatures. This property also controls the marina utility easement, Sarah said. Water access, electrical routing, maintenance rights. Bethany's eyes flicked toward the marina. You can't run a yacht event without utilities, Sarah continued, and you can't legally use those utilities without the easement holder's consent. The compliance officer shifted his weight. Bethany, she waved him off. That easement is shared. Sarah shook her head. It was, until it was reassigned when the previous owner sold the lodge. It runs with the land. Silence spread across the dock like oil on water. I finally spoke. You scheduled events, I said, keeping my voice low. You marked my boundaries. You brought a gate. Bethany snapped her head toward me. Because you don't belong to this community. I own part of its shoreline, I replied. And I own the access you need. Her face flushed, then paled. The yacht near the marina cut its engine completely. The sudden quiet made the moment feel heavier. You can't just shut down marina access, Bethany said. But there was doubt now, real doubt. "I don't have to," Sarah replied. "The law already did. You just ignored it." Bethany looked around, searching for backup, for confidence. The camera operator had lowered his rig. The surveyor was staring at the water. Jake stood motionless, bolt cutter hanging useless at his side. "This is harassment," Bethany said weakly. "No," Sarah said. "This is exposure." She stepped closer to Bethany, close enough that the pink suit seemed suddenly out of place against the weathered dock and dark water. "You assumed Remy didn't know what he owned," Sarah said. "You assumed he'd panic, settle, sell." Bethany clenched her jaw. "We're not done." Sarah nodded. "Neither are we." I took out my phone, not to film but to dial. Bethany's eyes followed it, fear creeping in around the edges of her anger. "Who are you calling?" she demanded. I met her gaze. "The governor." The word landed hard. Bethany laughed, but it sounded thin. "That's absurd." "Is it?" I asked. She looked past me at the crowd, then back at Sarah, then at the documents still visible in Sarah's hands. For the first time since she'd stepped onto my dock, Bethany Reed didn't look in control. She looked trapped. "You don't want to do this," she said. I nodded once. "Neither did you." The lake kept lapping at the boards, patient as ever. And somewhere between Bethany's certainty and Sarah's paperwork, the balance had shifted. And somewhere between Bethany's certainty and Sarah's paperwork, the balance had shifted. I stepped away from the knot of people and moved toward the end of the dock, where the water deepened and the noise thinned out. The boards creaked under my boots. I could feel eyes on my back, Bethany's, Sarah's, the contractors, the neighbors, but I didn't turn around. I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked it. Bethany followed, her heels clicking faster now. "This is harassment," she said loudly, for the benefit of the crowd. "You're trying to intimidate the HOA." I didn't answer. I scrolled, found the contact, and hit call. The line rang once, then twice. Behind me, someone whispered, "Is he serious?" Bethany stopped a few feet away. "You think name-dropping is going to—" The call connected. "Yes," I said calmly. "This is Remy Cole." I listened for a beat, the breeze lifting the surface of the lake into small, bright fractures of light. "They're here," I continued. "On the dock, right now." Bethany froze. I turned slightly so she could see my face as I spoke. "Yes, Clearwater Ridge, the lodge." Her mouth opened, then closed again. I listened, nodding once, then said, "No, sir, I haven't signed anything. They're attempting to secure access under an emergency ordinance." The word ordinance carried across the dock like a dropped tool. Bethany took a step back. "I understand," I said into the phone. "Yes, I'll hold." I lowered the phone but didn't hang up. The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. Even the contractors seemed unsure where to look. Jake shifted his weight. The compliance officer wiped his palms on his jacket. Bethany recovered enough to scoff. "You expect us to believe you're on the phone with—" "Yes," I said, cutting her off. "The governor." The word landed differently this time. It didn't bounce. It sank. "That's ridiculous," Bethany snapped, but her voice cracked around the edges. "You don't just call the governor." I met her eyes. "You don't just seize a lakeside lodge either." Sarah hadn't moved. She watched Bethany closely, the way you watch someone deciding whether to keep digging after they've hit stone. The phone vibrated softly in my hand. "Yes, sir," I said again. "Of course." I turned fully now, letting everyone see the screen, not the name, not the call details, just the simple fact that the call hadn't ended. Bethany's gaze flicked to it, then away, then back again. What is this? She demanded, more to Sarah than to me. Sarah answered without hesitation. This is what happens when you overreach. Bethany laughed again, but there was no confidence left in it. You think a phone call changes the law? No, Sarah said. It confirms it. The crowd near the marina fence had grown. A few boats had slowed in the channel, engines idling low as people leaned over, rails to watch. This wasn't a private confrontation anymore. It was a scene. The phone buzzed again. Yes, I said. I understand. I paused, then added, They've already cut locks and installed hardware. Bethany's face drained of color. I listened, eyes fixed on the water, then nodded once more. Thank you, sir. I ended the call. For a moment, no one spoke. Bethany broke the silence first. Who was that really? She asked. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Someone who doesn't like state infrastructure being treated like a party venue. Her head snapped up. State infrastructure? Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing. You're bluffing, Bethany insisted, though it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. This is private property. It is, I said. That's the point. The compliance officer stepped closer to Bethany and spoke under his breath. She waved him off, irritation flashing back into her expression like a reflex. You don't have authority here, she said. Even if you... The sound of engines cut her off. Not the soft idle of yachts. Heavier. Closer. From the road beyond my gate, two dark vehicles rolled into view, unmarked but purposeful. They didn't rush. They didn't hesitate. They parked cleanly, doors opening in sync. Conversation on the dock died instantly. A man in a dark jacket stepped out of the first vehicle, scanning the scene with a practiced eye. He didn't look surprised. He looked prepared. Bethany's breath caught. Who is that? Sarah finally spoke, her voice quiet, but unmistakably satisfied. The reason you should have stopped when you had the chance. The man started down toward the dock. Bethany's confidence collapsed in real time. She straightened, smoothed her jacket, then smoothed it again, like she could press the fear out of it. This inspection is ongoing, she said loudly, too loudly. We have legal authority. The man stopped at the edge of the dock and held up a hand. Ma'am, he said, voice even, carrying easily over the water. You don't. Bethany stared at him, stunned. And who are you supposed to be? He reached into his jacket and produced a badge. Not flashy, not theatrical, just real. My name is Thomas Avery, he said. I'm here on behalf of the governor's office. The words hit like a dropped anchor. Bethany's mouth opened. No sound came out. Behind her, the contractors began to step back, tools lowering, certainty evaporating. Avery looked at me. Mr. Cole? Yes, I said. He nodded once. We need to talk. The lake rippled quietly around us, unchanged. But everything else had. Thomas Avery didn't rush. He walked the length of the dock with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was allowed to stand. The boards creaked under his shoes, the same way they had under Bethany's heels earlier. But the sound felt different now, measured instead of invasive. Behind him, another man exited the second vehicle and remained near the shoreline, scanning the area with practiced ease. Not aggressive, observant. Avery stopped beside Sarah first. Ms. Mitchell, he said, acknowledging her with a slight nod. Good to see you again. Sarah returned it. I wish it were under better circumstances. So do I, Avery replied. Then he turned to Bethany. Ms. Reed, he said, voice even. You're the HOA president? Bethany swallowed. Yes. On whose authority are you conducting this inspection? He asked. She lifted her chin, trying to recover. Under Clearwater Ridge's emergency shoreline ordinance. Avery held out his hand. I'll need to see it. Bethany hesitated, just a fraction too long, then gestured to the lawyer with the briefcase. The man hurried forward and passed the packet over. Avery flipped through it carefully. He didn't skim. He read. The silence stretched. The only sounds were water against wood and a distant engine idling too long. Finally, Avery closed the packet. This ordinance, he said, has no standing over this property. Bethany's voice rose. That's not for you to decide. Avery met her gaze. Actually, it is. He turned slightly toward the lake, then back to her. This lodge and the adjacent shoreline are covered under a state land use agreement tied to critical water infrastructure. The words landed with weight. Bethany shook her head. That's impossible. This is a private residence. It is privately owned, Avery agreed, and it is also protected. Sarah stepped in, her tone precise. Mr. Cole's prior work and the property's location qualify it under state oversight provisions enacted after the reservoir upgrades 10 years ago. Bethany stared at me. You never said. I wasn't required to, I replied. Avery continued. Any attempt to seize, inspect, or repurpose this property without state coordination constitutes overreach. Overreach? Bethany snapped. We're maintaining community standards. You're interfering with protected land, Avery corrected. And you've already crossed that line. He gestured toward the dock hardware. The clamps, the gate, the cut lock. Those actions have been documented, he said. They trigger mandatory review. The compliance officer took a step back, color draining from his face. This is harassment, Bethany insisted, but the word had lost its edge. Avery shook his head once. This is exposure. He turned to me. Mr. Cole, the governor asked me to convey a message. I waited. He confirms that the YUM, lodge and shoreline are yours, Avery said. Fully, legally, and that any further interference will be addressed at the state level. The crowd near the marina murmured. Phones rose higher. Bethany's shoulders sagged, then stiffened again. You can't just... We can, Avery said, firm now. And we will. He looked back at the contractors. You are to remove all equipment immediately. No one argued. Jake moved first, unclipping the gate and dragging it away from the dock entrance. The sound of metal scraping wood felt like a release. The surveyor shut off his laser. The camera operator powered down his rig and lowered it, eyes on the ground. Bethany watched it happen like she was seeing the future close in. This isn't over, she said weakly. Avery met her stare. For you, it probably is. He nodded to the second man near the shoreline, who was already on the phone. An investigation will follow, Avery continued, including how this ordinance was drafted, who authorized it, and whether similar actions were taken against other homeowners. Bethany's eyes flicked to Marcus in the crowd, to the marina, to the road. She said nothing. Within minutes, the dock looked like it had before dawn. Clean, open, quiet. The yacht in the channel powered up and turned away, wake spreading wide before fading into ripples. Avery shook my hand. You did the right thing by not escalating. I nodded. I just stood my ground. Sometimes that's enough, he said. Bethany and her people retreated to their vehicles, pink suit now muted against the trees. When they drove away, there was no dust cloud this time, just absence. I stood at the end of the dock and watched the water settle. For the first time since Bethany had stepped onto my boards, the lake felt like mine again. But I knew better. This wasn't just about a dock anymore. It was about what would happen when daylight hit the HOA's paper trail. The next weeks unfolded without drama, which was exactly how you could tell something serious was happening. There were no more surprise visits, no trucks idling by my gate, no cameras pretending not to film. Instead, there were letters, official ones, requests, notices, carefully worded emails that never used Bethany Reed's name, only titles and departments. Sarah and I spent long afternoons at the kitchen table, papers spread out like a map of a storm that had already passed, but left debris everywhere. County records were pulled. Emergency votes were questioned. The corrected survey Bethany had relied on turned out to be unfiled, unsigned, and traced back to a consultant who had never been authorized to act on behalf of the county. "That's not a mistake," Sarah said, tapping the page with her pen. "That's fabrication." The investigation widened quickly. Once the state opened the door, other homeowners stepped forward. Marcus was the first, carrying a box of old notices and payment receipts that showed a pattern too neat to ignore. Then came the Parkers' attorney. Then a woman from the far end of the lake who'd sold under pressure and moved away quietly, thinking it was her fault. It never was. The HOA board suspended Bethany pending review. She resigned 2 days later. The announcement cited personal reasons. No one believed it. The next announcement dissolved the emergency ordinance entirely. The one after that froze all fines issued under it. By the time winter crept down from the hills, Clearwater Ridge looked different. Not physically, same gates, same manicured hedges, but lighter, like something had stopped pressing down on it. On a clear morning in November, a new sign went up at the edge of my dock. I mounted it myself, bolts tight, edges square. Private property, no HOA access. The letters were simple, no flourish, no threat, just truth. Neighbors began to wave again. Boats passed without slowing to stare. The marina returned to its usual rhythm. Engines in the morning, laughter on weekends, quiet at dusk. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the water copper, Sarah stood beside me on the dock and watched the reflections stretch and break. "You could have sold," she said. "A lot of people would have." "I didn't come here to run," I replied. She smiled. "You didn't come here to fight either." "No," I said. "I came here to own what I paid for." The lake answered with a soft slap against the pilings. Weeks later, a letter arrived from the governor's office. Brief, formal, appreciative. It confirmed what Avery had said that morning. The lodge and shoreline were mine, protected, and not subject to future interference without coordination at the state level. But the most important change wasn't on paper. It was the quiet. The kind of quiet you get when boundaries are respected, when water moves the way it's supposed to, when a place finally understands who it belongs to. On my last walk of the season along the shoreline, I passed the saplings where orange ribbons had once fluttered. They were gone now. In their place were bare branches and fallen leaves, natural markers that didn't pretend to be anything else. I stopped at the end of the dock, breathed in the cold air, and let the lake reflect the sky back at me. Real power isn't shouting. It's owning the truth and letting it stand. If you've ever had an HOA or anyone else try to push you off what you rightfully own, drop a justice in the comments. I read every one. Sometimes standing your ground isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, steady, and rooted in truth. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing and staying with us. There are more real battles, real land, and real justice still to come.